chapter 2.2, painting. And remember, we're in part 2 of the book, Media and Process. I forgot to mention that. We're into fresco now. Now, fresco is what we see on giant murals, mostly older murals, but it is a really strong bonding technique to a wall, like a big area. But unfortunately, in this day and age, buildings change hands, or somebody decides they don't want that piece of artwork there, or they're going to tear the building down, that fresco is stuck there, okay? So that's not our mentality if you think about most of history. Once a building's built, it's meant to be there for a couple hundred years anyway. In the Egyptians' case, forever. So we see it in Egypt, fresco, but it's the earliest ones that we know of are from Crete and the Mediterranean, not far away from Egypt. So 3,000, 3,500-year-old pieces. And it's pigment and water onto freshly applied plaster. Now, the lime in the plaster, when you're plastering something like when you're putting plaster on a wall and it's wet and you're smearing it around, it has enough of a bonding agent to bind with the pigments. So there is a binder there, but in this case, it's coming from the wall. It's not in the pigment and water mixture, if that makes sense. So just pigment and water. It's a water-based medium, and then it's applied to the plaster, and the plaster itself is the binder, or it contains the binder. So there's Bond fresco called good fresco, which is more permanent, and that is wet. Think of it as wet fresco. And there's fresco secco. Secco is dry. So good or wet is the same thing, and then dry fresco is the least favorable. It's less durable. We look at the Sistine Chapel, very famous, of course, with Michelangelo, who's a sculptor primarily, or was until this commission came along. If you notice all the sculptural detail and all the three-dimensionality of the figures in this fresco, in this painting, you can understand how he probably preferred sculpture and was a very good sculptor. So he added this too, by the way. Those don't actually exist. This particular detail, I believe, my eye's a little fooled as well. I don't want to get into mixing up our terms too much, but that's called trompe l'oeil. I believe that's a real, actual architectural ornament there. And then he drew this one. It could be the reverse, but I'm pretty sure that's real. That's painting. Okay, that's stone. And this is painting. That's all painting. Every single thing, that's painting. Everything we see here, that's all painted. So anyway, this is wet fresco. It's lasted 500-600 years now. And it's on the ceiling, which think about laying on your back on a board, on a scaffold, painting for years. Oh, it just sounds awful. So he used a strategic approach in order to disguise the seams between the different days' work, which were some of these, segments. Like this could just be a segment, and then you wouldn't see that much of a line. 4 years he did this. All right, another fresco that we see in Crete in Greece. Now this is in southern Greece, the island of Crete. And this is quite old, and it hasn't survived as well because it's on a wall of a palace that kind of fell down. So some of these segments have been repaired. You can see how this had fallen off, or some of this might have been painted in. I'm not 100% sure on the history of the actual piece, but this is a fresco on a wall, and it's quite old, and we know that the Greeks and other Mediterranean cultures were using fresco. Now, Jose Clemente Orozco, his Prometheus. This is in Claremont, California from 1930. A lot of the Mexican artists that did murals, Diego Rivera is one of the most famous, Orozco, and there were a lot of other people coming back and forth in the U.S. and making artwork on a large scale. And this one's at the Claremont College. Pomona College, it's pretty accessible, kind of a place to go. I don't know what building it's in. Oh, Frary Hall. I haven't seen this in person. There's a Diego Rivera mural up in San Francisco that's quite famous. And throughout the country, usually New York, I would say San Francisco and LA area, which Claremont is, you would see some of these murals. But that's really quite amazing to think that you'd bring somebody from somewhere else and just do these amazing murals. Very popular at the time. So his work was more socio-political. I'm not going to get too into that, but he did a fresco piece that was quite large, 20 feet high. So he re-embraced this older technique, and his work was about social justice and freedom. And yeah, the Mexican mural renaissance. I was struggling for that expression. All right, another artist that does dry fresco on wood as opposed to a wall. Now, one thing I will tell you about frescoes and paintings, murals, and so on. Murals nowadays, a lot of times they paint it on a canvas, and then they pop, like maybe it's even regular oil paint or acrylic paint, and then they pop it onto the wall and stick it to the wall. So should there be a decision to remove it or sell the building or something, because we're in such a time of change, it can kind of be scraped off and be intact. So the idea of using frescoes on a wall is a little bit less frequent. This is 2002, and it's on wire mesh on wood. So we're mixing our media here. It's not usually on wood fresco, but she's trying the she is trying the wet fresco. I beg your pardon, I read that wrong. But she's going for a more abstract style to engage with some of these, to leave some of this evidence of gesture and brushstroke when we talked about gesture. This is a very gestural type of painting to show some of the energy, and she's getting it from the fresco techniques. Okay, the next one is going to be tempera. Now tempera, egg tempera, true tempera has egg in it. Raw egg. Egg white is a really good binder. And our book talks about scraping it off of something. If you've ever egged someone's car or had your car egged, it pretty much peels that paint right off because it bonded with the paint. It's not an abrasive or, how do you want to say, an acid, but what it does is it bonds with the paint and the binder, and then when you try to take it off, the whole thing, the paint's going to come off with it. So it's a great binder found in nature. Tempera paint that you've had in elementary school, not the same thing. It's a more commercial recipe. But at any rate, the ancient tempera is made with egg as a binding agent and applied with a brush. And it has to dry. It dries really quickly, so you can't just muck about and dink around. You have to do it kind of quickly. First examples are in ancient tombs. The one we're going to look at is from the Middle Ages, just before the Renaissance, Duccio in Italy, and it's got gold leaf as well, which is hard to see in here, but the crown around Jesus would be gold leaf, and some of the other, if there's halos or elements, some images show things better. Gold does not photograph very well, just FYI. At any rate, the colors tend to be flatter or duller than what we're used to because the pigment sort of doesn't have any depth to it. It's very flat looking, and it's hard to mix the colors. Like everything kind of has to be pre-mixed and then applied. You can't blend very well, so it has to be layered. And this is on wood. Yeah, so short detailed brush strokes. This particular piece is tempera, but a lot of these works of art, these little miniatures, if you look at it, 7 inches by 4 inches, so less than half the size of a piece of paper. A lot of these are done with gouache, which is a different medium, but in this particular case, it's done with tempera. So he's combining the gold leaf. You can see it much better in this image. You can see these leaves here and these leaves here. Now, gold leaf isn't normally for leaves. That's not the impression I want to give you. Gold leaf comes in a packet of little leaves. They look like little squares that are kind of papery, and then they're applied with some gum arabic.